Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we're going to start international option in the age of imperialism, and the topic or the article is a European conflict becomes a world war. At the start, it was widely assumed that the war would be a fast-moving affair involving a series of battles between rival cavalry units. Most people believed it would be over by Christmas. Within a few months, however, it became clear that this outlook was vastly optimistic. The conflict rapidly became a war of attrition in which soldiers of all the nationalities found themselves trapped in trenches, risking their life in order to gain a few meters of land. Modern weaponry had rendered traditional methods of warfare obsolete. Ultimately, the First World War lasted 52 months and caused the death of around 20 million people, many of them civilians. Initially, the war was a purely European affair involving the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, Bulgaria against the Allied powers of Britain, France, and Russia. Although Italy was a member of the Triple Alliance, when the war broke out, it decided to retain neutral, arguing that its alliance with Germany was defensive and that Austria-Hungary's aggression released Italy from any obligation to join the Central Powers. In April 1915, won over by the promises from Britain and France, would it gain possession of large areas of territory in the Tyrol and on the Adriatic Sea, Dalmatia, and Styria. Italy entered the war on the side of the Allied forces. So according to this paragraph, when the war broke out, so it was considered by most of the nationalities, most of the countries, that it would be the series of battles, and within months, or even it was possible at that particular moment that before Christmas the war would be over. But as the war progresses, the strategy of the different countries, they change, and slowly and steadily the war become a war of attrition. We need to go for the definition. The war of attrition, a conflict in which each side tries to wear down and slowly destroy its enemy by a process of constant attack and steady killing. So eventually it took more than 52 months, more than 4 years, and this World War One took more than 20 million people, which most of the people were civilian. And in the beginning, it was basically it was two camps, two groups, the Triple Alliance and the Central Alliance. So Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria was on the other side, and the opponents were Britain, France, Russia. They were on the another side. So Italy played a very crucial part in it. In the beginning, Italy was along the German, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey. But as the war started, so he refused to join Germany because simply they simply told German, it wasn't necessary for them to make their commitments valid because as the Austria-Hungary are involved in the war, so we are not supposed to be the part of war. And when the Britain and the France gave a sort of a promise, gave a sort of assurance that if they would win the war, Italy would be given a lot of areas, and the areas was like Tyrol, Dalmatia, and Styria. So at this promise, Italy joined another party. He joined Britain, France, and Russia. What began as a conflict between the major European powers soon began to involve people from far-flung regions of the world as the European nation deployed soldiers from their distant colonies. The British Army, for example, included men from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. So basically, the thing is that when the war started, it was, you can say that it was between maximum 7 to 8 countries, having two different groups. But as we started in the very beginning of a chapter about Scramble for Africa, so obviously it clearly gave us a picture that in South Africa, there were a lot of colonies of European powers like France, like Britain, like Germany, Italy, and at the same time in subcontinent, Britain was ruling the subcontinent as well. So when the war started, it was assumed that it would be finished quite earlier. Plus, it was war between the European countries or European nations. But as the war progresses, the things became so tense. So the people from different colonies, they were taken part in the war, and so it becomes so widespread. So that is the reason it was called First World War. The USA enters the war. To begin with, the USA saw no reason to become involved in the war right in the beginning, because thousands of miles away, its isolationist traditional mean that Americans were unwilling to interfere in European affairs. By 1917, however, the situation had changed. The USA attempts to maintain its trading links with Europe were increasingly undermined by the German U-boats, submarines, convinced that the USA was supplying Britain and its allies with weapons. Germans regularly attacked US ships crossing the Atlantic. At the first, the German would issue warnings to ships so that passengers could be evacuated before the attack began. In 1915, however, the Lusitania was sunk without warning, killing more than 120 Americans. In 1916, another American ship, the Sussex, suffered the same fate. There was outrage across the USA, and the President Woodrow Wilson issued a stark warning to Germany. So, I mean, it was all about how the USA decided to take part in the war, and it was starting by a misunderstanding. Germans simply considered that USA ships that were taking weapons and the other supplies to Britain and France. So, USA was considered to be in alliance with Britain, France, and Russia. Eventually, it was not like that, because they were simply, trading, giving the merchandise to different countries. So they were simply following their route, sea route. But as the German army drawn two of the ships of USA, so in 1916, it decided, the president of Woodrow Wilson issued a warning to Germany. Germany would stop all this stuff, otherwise they have to pay to face the music. So this is what we have here. We got a reference: unless the imperial government should now immediately declare and effect an abandonment of its present methods of submarine warfare against passengers and freight-carrying vessels, the government of the United States can have no choice but to serve diplomatic relation with the German Empire altogether. So this is a kind of reference we need to learn. And according to this reference, it was a clear warning from President Woodrow Wilson. It was in a speech to the US Congress, and dates, as I mentioned earlier, it's very crucial and very important, which really give us a picture, give us an idea when USA decided to be the part of this World War I, 19th April 1916. So in addition, the USA was concerned by the intelligence it received that Germany was trying to provoke Mexico and Japan into declaring war against the USA. This seems to be an attempt by Germany to keep the Americans out of the war in the Europe. On 6 April 1917, with no sign of the U-boat campaign seizing, the US declared war on Germany. President Woodrow Wilson described this as an act of high principle and idealism, a crusade to make the world safe for democracy. So this was the stance when German instigate Mexico and Japan to declare war on America. So America doesn't have any choice, just rather than to attack or give a warning and simply attack to the areas which are concerned by the German Empire. Japan enters the war. Honoring its alliance with Britain, Japan declared war on Germany in 1914. Its primary role was to secure the sea lanes of the South Pacific and Indian Ocean against the German Navy. While the Western powers were fully occupied fighting the war in Europe, Japan took advantage of the absence from the Far East Asia in the number of ways. So it was a golden opportunity for Japan to prove its dexterity, to prove its power, the supremacy in Southeast Asia. And what were the points which Japan took as an advantage? Japan began to supply the region with goods, and the European could no longer provide. Between 1914 and 1918, Japan exports of cotton cloths increased threefold, while its heavy industry was greatly expanded to fill the gap left by the absence of the European import of iron, steel, and chemicals. So first thing, golden opportunity for Japan. For 5 years, keep on exporting cotton goods to the European nations. And secondly, the absence of European import and iron and chemicals. Okay, so Japan doesn't have to pay money for their imports. Rather, taking a lot of money, getting a lot of money from export. First, throughout the war, Japan supplied Britain and its allies with shipping and other goods to assist with the surge in export to Japan. Japanese merchants fleet almost double in size during the war years. So one of the things, I mean, Japan has an opportunity to simply increase in power, naval power on the seas, on different oceans. So I mean, cotton first. Secondly, less imports. Thirdly, I mean, no comparison, no parallel forces against Japan in Far East Asia, and double the naval army. Japan attacked the German-controlled regions of China, Shantung province. This enabled Japan to gain greater influence in China without the opposition of the Western powers. In January 1915, Japan presented the Chinese with what became known as the 21 demands. These were designed to dramatically increase Japanese political and economic power and influence over much of the China. In effect, China would cease to be an independent country. The Chinese had no doubt that Japan would declare war on them if they refused to meet the demands. Despite a later revision of these demands, Japan was still able to extend its power base in China. Between 1916 and 18, Japan provided the Chinese with a series of loans, thereby increasing its financial, commercial, and economic influence over China. While the Western powers, particularly Britain and the USA, were greatly concerned by Japanese activities in the Far East, but they could do little about it. Japan was a vital ally in the war against Germany. So all these points, I mean, we come to know that how Japan became a power in the absence of Western powers in South Asia. So, I mean, first of all, the increase of cotton goods to European countries. Secondly, no more import from European countries during the war, so saving a lot of money for that purpose. I mean, double the naval army. So, I mean, a lot of hold in Pacific Ocean. Three things. Fourthly, I mean, just to crush German interest, German concern in China, Japan overtook all the lands, especially the Shantung province, through which it was an opportunity for Japan to extend its control over China. And by doing so, it was a clear sign for the people of China how to bear the pressure from Japanese government, because at the same time, Japanese government issued a demand which were called at that time 21 demands. Later, you can say a bit extended, a bit changed the demand, but still Chinese had to accept them, and there was a chance, as I mentioned earlier, for Japan to extend its control over China. And very surprisingly, all the European powers, especially Britain and France and Russia, they couldn't do anything except just to accept, I mean, Japanese control or hold over Chinese area. And lastly, Japan gave a lot of loan to Chinese government just to stabilize the empire, the state. So at this particular moment, one can say that commercially, economically, financially, politically, Japanese hold were considered on Chinese empire. So this is what we have. It's all about the war, and let's begin. It's a historical debate, and all this debate is about, I mean, who was responsible for the war? I mean, was there a clear opportunity? Was the war inevitable by launching a triple entente or triple alliance? So, did the development of two vital alliances system, the triple alliance and triple entente, make a major war inevitable? Complex issues such as the causes of the First World War can be interpreted in different ways. It is not surprising, therefore, that historians often differ in their opinions about the key issues. For example, historians disagree about the question above. The American diplomat and historian George Kennan was probably the first to suggest that the existence of the two rival alliances made a Europe war inevitable. So first of all, about this debate, there was a point then the war was inevitable by having two different alliances. So once, obviously it's quite natural, if a country is trying his best to having a lot of countries into its camp, so obviously the rival country will do the same just to protect for the defensive measure. So secondly, this claim used by the historian to support their conflicting opinion on this question are summarized in the next page, and it's all about, let me check, yes. So there is a debate, yes and no, war inevitable or not. The alliances cause uncertainty, fear and tension in Europe. This is the point. I mean, war is inevitable, so this is yes, I mean, due to alliances. But on the other side, against, both alliances were based on the waged treaties of friendship. They didn't compel countries to support each other in the war. For example, when Russia was losing its war against Japan in 1905, France offered no help. Italy, though a member of the Triple Alliance, entered the First World War in 1915 against Germany. So one point we can have, yes, the alliances were the basic reason, were the basic cause of war, but at the same time, no, the alliances were not, I mean, it was not a source of war, because there are still, you can say, friend relationship between them, and most of the treaties, and most of the commitments which were made within the countries, they were just for defensive measures. So it was not they were planning to have a war against each other. There was an arm race between the two alliances, leading to the existence of two well-armed vital camps. I mean, yes, we can say that, because we still remember that, I mean, Britain supported Japan a lot. Then France gave a lot of money to Russia to improve its weaponry. Yes, there is a reason. One can say that. So when there was an arm race, one can see that it's two different countries which are rival countries, and they are supporting each other. So there must be a question popped up in one's mind, that why can't we do the same? Between 1907 and 1914, the alliances actually helped to maintain peace, preventing incidents escalating into war. For example, in 1911, Britain threatened to support France over the issue of the Morocco led Germany to back down. So this is one of the reason one can say that no, these alliances was a kind of surety that we are not supposed to enter war otherwise until we have to pay the plenty for that. So this is the reason. See that, as is mentioned, for example, when there was a rebellion in Morocco, and Germany sent one of its troops to assist the people of Morocco. Then, I mean, Britain simply gave a warning to German people, I mean, German government. I mean, if they were involved in the war, they simply issue a warning to German government. So at that particular moment, Germany decided to back down. German leaders were convinced that the Triple Entente was an attempt to encircle and attack Germany. This is the reason, yes, most of the German leaders, they were convinced that the Triple Entente, the making of Triple Entente, the France, the Britain and the Russia, it was a clear sign that they are planning to encircle German and trying to cut German from the Central Asia. Although Germany supported Austria-Hungary in its war against Serbia in 1914, it had not done so in 1913. Germany devised the Schlieffen Plan because of its fear about the intention of the Triple Entente. Yes, we have studied a lot about the Schlieffen Plan. What was the plan is all about? Just to start war on different direction to different countries. The European power went to war in order to protect their own interest, not because of their alliance system. France helped Russia to increase its military strength and speed of mobilization. Austria-Hungary would not have declared war on Serbia without the certain knowledge that Germany would support it. The opposing sides in the First World War largely mirrored the two alliances. Germany, Austria-Hungary fought against France, Russia and Britain. So there is a debate, and we can say that, I mean, they're different. Obviously, it's a debate, so it's a lot of historians are convinced that the two different alliances, they were the basic reason to initiate which ignite the war, First World War. But on the same time, there are so many historians who simply say no, it was not the alliance system, rather than their personal interest, and there are certain events which trigger the First World War. In the upcoming lecture, tomorrow, hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, we will revise the whole chapter within 15 to 20 minutes. And after revising the whole chapter, then in the upcoming lectures, we will try to attempt a paper as well. I mean, if there are certain questions which had in the past papers, so how can we attempt them? Inshallah ta'ala, I will share the mark scheme as well. Till then, it's time to say goodbye. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.